Hey everyone, this is Yami, your Latina next door. Welcome back to my channel. As you know, I have been working on creating a studio for my YouTube channel. And we decided that the best place for it to go is in this room located in our basement, which is nice and large and kind of away from everything else. The process to properly create this into a studio is going to be a very long one, and we have already done quite a bit of work, so we thought we'd share what our progress is as of right now because there is so much that has been done. So we started off by removing everything in the room. It was kind of like a catch-all for random things, and then you can really see how large this space is right here. After everything was removed, then it was time to start taking down all that chair rail that was along the wall. It was really low set and it was unnecessary for us to keep it. Afterwards, my husband removed all of the insulation that was on the ceiling. We wanted it to look like a loft space, and since the basement was heated, the insulation wasn't necessary. Then it was off for demoing. The first thing my husband demoed was this closet that was right here. I shared it in my stories on Instagram, as well as my previous video where I showed you guys the plans for this space. It was an awkward little closet and it was going to be very difficult to use it as storage space, so we decided to go ahead and open it up. I finally decided that I wanted to put a bench on the bottom and create kind of like a closet mudroom. Now this space is actually going to be done at the very end of this, so even though I may finish the rest of the studio, this is going to still remain unfinished because we really need to get the studio up and running, and this can be done while I work in this space. And of course, we found out that underneath the chair rail was wallpaper that had been painted over, so we had to remove that. Then my husband took out the rest of the baseboards throughout the entire room. We'll be replacing the baseboards in this space with the same ones that we put along the first floor of the house. After the ceiling had all of the insulation removed, my husband took off any remaining items that did not belong up there, any nails, any boards, as well as all of the lights, so that he can go ahead and prep it for painting. Alright, so it's a little dark in here, but that is because Nelson already removed all of the lighting. He spent all day removing the lighting. He, real quick, he did all of the outlets, or I'm sorry, the switches, and he got them all wired correctly finally. So obviously the power had to be off. He removed the big lights and put them over there in that closet. And he's already run all of the wire for all of the can lights that are supposed to go up. We came in here earlier and we decided where we wanted them placed. And then he went up and put all of the, I guess, the wires, right, babe? Where they're gonna go.
Yes, that's correct. So all these yellows are just a representation of where the light's gonna hang. Once we put the actual light up in between the joists, I'll just wire these into each can. So each spot where you see these is where a can light's gonna be.
Yep. So, yeah, that's where he did this all in one day. So we are making progress.
And the reason that hole right here, if you want to see to the left, what that used to be is there was two switches that controlled the room, and for whatever reason, if people don't know what they're doing, they always have a really tough time wiring a 3-way and a 4-way switch. So I'm not sure what they had going on, but anyways, I had to open up that hole to get some wires in and rewired it. But everything should be good to go, ready for new fixtures.
Nelson has taped this off, as you can see, with plastic. We have both of the outlets up here that I need. He went ahead and moved this one up here since it's gonna have cabinets on the bottom. and he added a second one up there. And he just came back from Sherwin-Williams and he bought the paint that's going to be going up in the ceiling. We went ahead and got a 5-gallon bucket because we know this is going to take quite a bit. 1, and 2, we're going to be doing the rest of the basement, so we'll need additional paint anyways. So we're going to go ahead and use one. It's called Grizzly Gray, I believe. It's like a deep gray, but it's a neutral gray. It doesn't have a lot of brown or blues in it. So it's a nice dark neutral gray. And then we're going to be using the Wagner Spray Tech sprayer that we also used in our sunroom. This sprays pretty well, so he's going to go ahead and use that so that the project goes quickly and smoothly.
So this is the first time we've actually purchased any of these clothes coverings, but we figured that it was probably the best decision, and we're kind of glad we did, because there's a lot of overspray when you are spray painting upside down. So Nelson had a blast putting this on. And again, we used our Wagner Spray Tech machine, and the best thing about this machine is that you just pour the paint in, no diluting, it just goes right in the container and you can start spraying.
All right, so the update right now is that Nelson has primed the areas here and here where there used to be wallpaper. And once you remove wallpaper, it can be a very difficult situation because when you paint it with a regular paint, it can reactivate, and it often does, the glue that was used to adhere the wallpaper to the wall. We've been through this before in our last house. We learned a lot from it. And what you're supposed to do is paint it with oil-based primer. Now, whatever adhesive was used, unfortunately, it still kind of reacted with our oil-based primer. So Nelson had to sand it down, and then he had to re-spackle everything above the areas where there was wallpaper. He will eventually sand that down again, but as you can see, some areas right here, it's still a little wet. So while that dries, he's gonna work on installing the can lights that go up in these areas. And as you can see, he's got the ceiling painted and it looks so good. Even though it's obviously unfinished and it's open and it's rafters, I am absolutely glad that we went with the darker gray, which was Nelson's suggestion, by the way. And with everything, all the pipes, everything being the exact same color, it really doesn't look bad at all. So I'm excited to see what this looks like with lights because we've been kind of in here in the dark, as you can see, using only our little bit of like natural light from the outside. So this is what we're going to be installing, and Nelson's going to go over it right now.
These are residential grade downlights. These are recessed fixtures, or can lights is what they call them. And normally they're inside a ceiling, so all you can see is underneath, and you won't even see any of this stuff because it's covered by sheetrock. But we like the metallic look, so we didn't paint it to match the ceiling. And it's got these little arms you extend out, fit in between the studs, and then just wire them up. And then it's a two-part deal where you have the actual fixture and you got a little insert that has the light. Whether you choose incandescent or we went with LEDs so we can dim them and change the colors that it comes with, you know, whether it's a natural light or more of a yellow, depending on what kind of look we want to be able to use in this room, but that's it.
The room looks so much better after it was completely lit. And then here, Nelson is finishing up sanding the areas that had to be speckled where the wallpaper adhesive was. And then of course we had to clean up everything. It was pretty dusty. The overspray from the ceiling as well as all that sanding dust from the walls was just everywhere. The next order of business was painting the walls, and I went with the color Pure White by Magnolia. I really do prefer this paint for wall coverage. As you can see, it covers very well. However, we always do 2 coats of paint for any wall treatment. And apparently I had a lot to say here in this clip. And if you were wondering, yes, I absolutely did help paint this room. I just always do the trim and cut the room. So that's what you see me doing here. This is the second coat. At this point, you can already see a pretty huge difference in the room. Now, the back wall where you see me painting the trim, we did not give that one a second coat because that one's going to be covered in wallpaper. After the walls were done, and then it was time to tackle the floors. They did look pretty bad. So we decided to paint it with the same paint that we used in our sunroom. That paint in our sunroom has held up pretty well, and I've been very pleased with it. So we went ahead and used that same paint to paint our cement floors. And for this project, we did 2 coats of paint and 1 coat of sealer. It still looks a little streaky right here because it was still drying. After that, it was time to tackle the cabinets. And remember, we had another area in the basement that had this office from the previous owners, and we decided that we were going to reuse these cabinets in this space for my studio. We went ahead and brought in 4 of the upper cabinets and laid them on the floor just to get a feel for how it would look. If you recall, this is my mood board for this wall, and I wanted a couple cabinets on each side along with some shelves in the middle, and it worked out perfectly. Then it was off to figure out how we were going to put the wallpaper on. If you noticed on the mood board, there was also a section in the cabinets on the bottom where it's going to be kind of open. So I needed to make sure we installed that wallpaper in the center of the wall first before we installed any of the cabinets. And we needed to figure out how much we needed. Now I chose this wallpaper because I really loved the pattern, and I also chose it because it was peel and stick, kind of like a really thick, heavy duty contact paper. Only I found out later that unfortunately the pattern doesn't really align perfectly when you put them up next to each other. So this next panel right here, literally it took me about 25 minutes to put up because I was having such a hard time aligning it. Some parts would align, other parts wouldn't, and it was driving me absolutely mad. In the end, I did the very best that I could to make it look as nice and as possible. Unfortunately, I probably wouldn't use this wallpaper again. Now we ended up putting the wallpaper a little bit offset of the center, but it was still enough to cover the entire center area that I needed. And then it was off to installing the upper cabinets. After the cabinets were installed, we used the brackets that used to belong to our old laundry room when it was upstairs. We had taken them down, they were in the basement, and I just happened to have two exact boards that fit perfectly in between these two shelves. So it was really nice that everything that was put on the wall besides the wallpaper, we already had. Now the upper cabinets are supposed to be white and the bottom cabinets are going to be gray. So I went ahead and laid all of the doors down for the upper cabinets and made sure that they were all set and ready to go so I can start priming and painting them. Now for cabinets, I always use my tried and true method. I have shared this process with you all in my How to Paint Kitchen Cabinets video. If you haven't seen it, I'll go ahead and link to it. But I always do this process. These doors were in really good shape. They were barely used by the previous owners and were a lot newer than the cabinets that were upstairs. So I didn't even sand these. I just primed these with my favorite primer. Of course, it is oil-based, which is why you see me wearing a mask. It does stink pretty bad, but it is the best primer for the job. As always, I start with a brush and get all of the nooks and crevices, and then I come over with the roller and smooth everything out. I do like to let it sit overnight before I start painting it, and so the next day I came back in and began painting the cabinets with my favorite emerald paint from Sherwin-Williams, which is the best paint for cabinets in my opinion. I always start with the inside of the cabinet doors first, and I always do both coats before I start on the other side. So I'll do one in the morning, one in the evening, and let it set overnight, and then I'll flip them all over the next day and do the same thing to the exterior of the doors. I'll do one in the morning, one at night, and then let it cure overnight. Most of the time I'll let them cure for about a week before touching them, but these actually dried pretty well and they were ready to go the next day. After the cabinet doors had dried, I installed brand new hardware. I bought these at Home Depot and these were one of their cheaper ones. I wanted to make sure they matched the shelving that was on the wall, so I went ahead and went with this dark color. Then after all the upper cabinets were complete, it was time to head back to that wallpaper and finish putting it on the remaining areas. I cannot tell you how happy I am that I'm done with this part of the project. There is still so much more left to be done. We still have to build the bottom cabinets, add my workspace, just a lot of different things. So stay tuned. This is what the space currently looks like, and there's so much more left to come. I hope you've enjoyed it up until this point. Make sure you hit subscribe so that you can continue getting updates on this space, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Until then, adios.